The Apache woman's hands trembled as she laid out her beadwork on the dusty street corner of Utica, New Mexico territory, knowing full well that most townsfolk would walk past her as if she were invisible. It was the autumn of 1878, and Zara Kitani had been coming to this same corner every Tuesday and Friday for 3 months now, hoping to trade her intricate beadwork for enough bread to feed herself and her younger sister. The town was small, barely more than a collection of weather-beaten buildings huddled together against the vast expanse of high desert, but it was the closest settlement to where she and her sister had been hiding since their village was destroyed. The memories of that night still haunted her, the soldiers and the flames and the screaming, but she pushed those thoughts away as she always did when they threatened to overwhelm her. Her beadwork was beautiful, each piece carefully crafted with patterns her grandmother had taught her before the old woman passed. She had necklaces with geometric designs in blue and white, bracelets with red and yellow patterns that resembled sunset over the mesas, and small pouches adorned with intricate symbols that told stories of her people. But beauty meant little when most people in town saw her as less than human, a reminder of conflicts they would rather forget. The morning sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the dirt road. A few people passed by, some averting their eyes, others staring with open hostility. One woman spat near Zara's blanket, close enough that the spittle nearly hit her wares. Zara kept her eyes down, her jaw clenched. She had learned that showing anger or pride only made things worse. She was 22 years old, though she felt decades older. Her long black hair was braided simply down her back, and she wore a faded cotton dress she had traded for months ago, knowing that her traditional clothing would only draw more unwanted attention. Her skin was bronze from the sun, and her dark eyes held a wariness that came from too much loss at too young an age. Around midday, when the heat was becoming oppressive and Zara was beginning to lose hope of making any trades, she heard the distinctive sound of boots on the wooden walkway. She glanced up briefly and saw a tall man approaching. He was a cowboy, that much was clear from his worn leather chaps, dusty hat, and the way he walked with the slight bow-legged gait of someone who spent more time on horseback than on foot. He stopped in front of her blanket, and for a moment, Zara braced herself for insults or worse. But instead he crouched down, his knees creaking slightly, and picked up one of the necklaces with surprising gentleness. "These are mighty fine," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel sliding down a dry riverbed. "Did you make them yourself?" Zara looked at him properly for the first time. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, with sun-weathered skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at the ends where it touched his collar. His eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like the sky just before a storm. There was a scar on his right cheekbone, a thin white line that suggested an old injury. "Yes," she said quietly, her English accented but clear. "I trade for bread." He nodded, still examining the necklace. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of a working man, but he handled her beadwork with respect. "How much bread for this one?" "2 loaves," she said, expecting him to laugh or walk away. 2 loaves was a lot, but the necklace had taken her 3 days to complete. Instead, he just nodded again. "Fair price for this kind of work." He set the necklace down carefully and looked at the rest of her wares. "How much bread for everything you have here?" Zara blinked, certain she had misheard. "Everything?" "That's right, every piece." He gestured at the blanket. "Name your price." She quickly counted in her head. She had 12 pieces laid out, representing nearly 2 weeks of work. 20 loaves, she said, her heart pounding. It was an enormous amount, enough to feed her and her sister for weeks if they were careful. The cowboy stood up, pulling a small leather pouch from his pocket. The bakery will need coin, not beads. How about I buy them all from you proper and you can get your own bread? Zara stood as well, suspicious now. In her experience, when white men were generous to Apache women, they wanted something in return, something she would never willingly give. Why? She asked bluntly. He seemed to understand her wariness. He took a step back, giving her space. Because your work is worth it, and because I reckon you could use a fair shake. He paused, then added, Name's Dawson Fields. I work at the Triple Creek Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I'm no saint, madam, but I'm no devil either. I want to buy your beadwork because it's beautiful and well made, and that's the only reason. Something in his voice, in the straightforward way he met her eyes, made Zara want to trust him, though she fought against the impulse. Trust had gotten her people killed. Trust had led to broken treaties and stolen land. But she needed the money desperately, and she could see no deception in his weathered face. $30, she said, naming a price that was fair for the work but still substantial. Dawson did not hesitate. He counted out the bills from his pouch and handed them to her. Would you mind if I watched while you pack them up? I want to make sure they do not get damaged on my way back. Zara took the money, still half expecting some trick, but she carefully began wrapping each piece in the soft cloth she had brought for this purpose. Dawson stood quietly, not hovering, just waiting. When she had everything bundled, she handed it to him. Thank you, she said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She could not remember the last time she had thanked a white person for anything. No, thank you, Dawson replied. He tipped his hat to her, a gesture of respect that startled her. And then he was walking away, his long strides carrying him toward the general store. Zara stood there for a moment, clutching the money in her hand, feeling oddly unsettled. She had expected many things from this day, but genuine kindness had not been among them. She made her way to the bakery, where the owner, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, looked at her with barely concealed disdain. But money was money, and when she bought 10 loaves of bread, he took her coins without comment. She also went to the general store and bought beans, a small sack of cornmeal, and some salt. With her remaining money carefully tucked away, she began the long walk back to the small canyon where she and her sister were camping. The canyon was about 5 miles from town, hidden from the main road by a series of rock formations that made it nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. It was not much, just a small cave that provided shelter and a nearby spring that gave them water, but it had kept them safe so far. Her sister, Nault, was waiting anxiously when Zara arrived. Nault was 16, with the same dark eyes and hair as Zara, but where Zara had learned to guard her emotions, Nault's face was still open and expressive. She ran to her sister when she saw the bundles of food. You got so much. Did you trade all your pieces? A cowboy bought them all, Zara said, still processing what had happened. He paid me in coin, real money. Nault's excitement dimmed slightly. Was he? No, Zara said quickly, understanding her sister's fear. He was respectful, strange but respectful. That night, as they ate bread and beans by their small fire, Zara found her thoughts returning to Dawson Fields. She told herself it meant nothing, that one act of decency did not undo centuries of cruelty, but she could not shake the memory of his storm-colored eyes and the gentle way he had handled her beadwork. The next market day, Zara returned to her corner with new pieces she had made. She told herself she was not hoping to see Dawson again, that she was simply conducting business as usual. But when the morning passed without any sign of him, she felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Just as she was preparing to pack up for the day, having made only 2 small trades for a total of 1 loaf of bread and a handful of dried apples, She heard those same distinctive boot steps. She looked up to find Dawson approaching, his hat tilted back slightly on his head. "Afternoon," he said, crouching down by her blanket again. "I was hoping I would catch you here. You were looking for me." The question came out before Zara could stop it. "I was." He smiled, a slow, warm expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "See, I gave those pieces I bought to my mother and sisters, and they about lost their minds over how beautiful they were. My youngest sister, she's getting married come spring, and she was wondering if you might be willing to make her a special piece for her wedding. Something unique." Zara's mind raced. A commission meant guaranteed money, meant security for her and Nault. But it also meant more contact with this man, and she was not sure how she felt about that. What kind of piece? She was thinking a necklace and maybe a bracelet to match. She likes blue, the color of mountain flowers. She said she would pay whatever you think is fair. When is the wedding? Not until April, so you would have time. Zara considered. It was only October now. 6 months was plenty of time to create something truly special. $50, she said, expecting him to negotiate. "Deal," Dawson said immediately. "She will be thrilled. Can I bring her to meet you? Maybe next market day. She will want to talk to you about what she is imagining." The thought of meeting more white people, of being scrutinized and judged, made Zara's stomach tighten, but she needed the work. "Yes." "Wonderful." Dawson stood, but he seemed reluctant to leave. "I never properly asked your name." "I know you must have one, and it seems wrong to keep thinking of you as the lady with the beads." "Zara Kitani," she said quietly. "Zara," he repeated, and the way he said it, with care and attention to the pronunciation, made something flutter in her chest. "That's a beautiful name." "What does Kitani mean, if you do not mind my asking?" Most white people never asked about such things, never cared. "It means house in my language, my family's name from long ago." "House," Dawson said thoughtfully. "A good, strong name. Everybody needs a house, a place to belong." The simple statement, spoken without pity or condescension, touched something deep inside Zara. She found herself saying, "I should go. The walk back is long." "Where are you staying?" Dawson asked, then quickly added, "I am not prying. I just worry about you walking all that way alone. These roads are not always safe." "I can take care of myself," Zara said, more sharply than she intended. Dawson held up his hands. "I do not doubt that for a second. I have seen Apache women. I know you are tougher than most men I have met. I just meant—" "Well, I meant that if you ever needed help, I would be willing to provide it. No strings attached." Zara wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury she could not afford. "I will be here next market day," she said, beginning to pack up her few remaining pieces. "I will bring my sister Sarah. Her intended's name is Thomas, decent fellow, works at the bank. They are good people, I promise." As Dawson walked away, Zara watched him go, noting the way other townspeople greeted him, how he seemed well-liked and respected. She wondered what his story was, what had brought him to this dusty corner of the territory, and why he seemed so different from most of the white men she had encountered. The week passed slowly. Zara worked on preliminary sketches for the wedding pieces, using charcoal on flat rocks to plan out her designs. Nault helped gather materials, searching for the right stones and trading some of their food for blue beads from a traveling merchant who passed through their area. When market day came again, Zara arrived at her corner with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. She did not have to wait long. Dawson arrived mid-morning with a young woman who looked to be about 19 or 20. She had the same light brown hair as Dawson, though hers was long and pinned up in a fashionable style, and similar blue-green eyes. "Zara, this is my sister Sarah," Dawson said by way of introduction. "Sarah, this is Zara Kitani, the artist I told you about." Sarah's face lit up with a genuine smile that immediately put Zara on edge. In her experience, white women were either afraid of her or hateful, sometimes both. But Sarah knelt down beside the blanket with enthusiasm, her skirts pooling around her in the dust. "Miss Kitani, Dawson showed me the necklace he bought, and I have never seen anything so beautiful in all my life. I have been dreaming about what you might create for my wedding. May I show you what I was thinking?" Over the next hour, Sarah sketched out her ideas, and Zara found herself warming to the young woman despite her reservations. Sarah was kind and respectful, asking questions about Apache symbolism and listening intently to Zara's answers. She wanted the pieces to incorporate both her heritage and honor the land she loved, a sentiment that surprised Zara. "Thomas and I are planning to build a house on a piece of land near the Sangre de Cristo Mountains," Sarah explained. "I want to remember this place this time forever. Your work seems to capture something essential about this territory, something wild and beautiful and true." When they finally agreed on a design, an intricate pattern that would incorporate blue stones in a traditional Apache geometric pattern, Sarah insisted on paying half the commission up front. She counted out $25 into Zara's hand. "I trust you completely," Sarah said. "Dawson said you are honest and talented, and I can see he was right." After Sarah left, promising to check in periodically to see the progress, Dawson lingered. He seemed to have something on his mind, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way that might have been endearing if Zara had allowed herself to find it so. "I was wondering," he finally said, "if you might be interested in a business arrangement." Zara tensed. "What kind of arrangement?" "The general store. They have been looking for items to sell, things that are unique. I mentioned your beadwork to the owner, Mr. Peterson, and he said he would be willing to sell your pieces on consignment. You would get 70% of whatever they sell for, and you would not have to sit out here in the heat and cold anymore." It was a generous offer, almost too generous. "Why would you do this for me?" Dawson looked at her steadily. "Because it is wrong, what happens to you here. The way people treat you like you are invisible or worse. You have a gift, a real talent, and you should be able to make a living from it without being degraded. I know I cannot change the world, but maybe I can change this one small thing." "You do not know me," Zara said. "You do not know what I have done where I come from." "I know enough," Dawson replied. "I know you are trying to survive in a world that is stacked against you. I know you create beauty in the face of ugliness. That is enough for me." Zara wanted to argue to push him away, to protect herself from the inevitable disappointment that came from hoping. But she was tired, so tired of fighting every single day. "I will think about it," she said. "That is all I ask." Dawson tipped his hat to her again and turned to leave, but then he paused. "Zara, I ride into town most market days. If you ever want to talk or if you need anything, I am usually at the saloon around noon just having lunch. You would be welcome to join me." The invitation hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Zara did not respond, but she did not reject it outright either. Dawson seemed to take that as enough, and he walked away with that same long, strided gait. That night, as Zara told Nault about the commission and Dawson's offer, her sister looked at her with knowing eyes. "You like him," Nault said. "It was not a question." "I do not even know him," Zara protested, "but you want to." Zara could not deny it, so she said nothing, focusing instead on the fire. Over the next several weeks, a pattern developed. Zara would come to town on market days, and Dawson would find her at some point during the day. Sometimes he brought his mother, a kind-faced woman named Margaret who insisted on buying several pieces and who treated Zara with a courtesy that was startling in its normalcy. Sometimes he came alone, and they would talk while Zara worked on her beadwork. Through these conversations, Zara learned that Dawson was 26 years old, that he had come to New Mexico territory 5 years ago from Texas after his father died, bringing his mother and 3 sisters with him. He worked as a ranch hand, saving money to eventually buy his own land. He loved horses and the open sky, good coffee and terrible jokes. He had a scar on his cheek from a run-in with a barbed wire fence when he was learning to string fencing, and he was allergic to cats, which his youngest sister found endlessly amusing since she kept adopting strays. In return, Zara found herself sharing small pieces of her own story. She told him about her grandmother's teachings, about the significance of different patterns and colors in Apache beadwork. She told him about Nault, though not where they were staying. She told him about her love of the desert sunrise and the way the mesas looked when storm clouds gathered. She did not tell him about the massacre, about watching her parents die, about the soldiers who had destroyed everything she knew. Some wounds were too deep to share, especially with someone who, no matter how kind, represented the people who had inflicted them. But Dawson seemed to understand her silences. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. And slowly, so slowly that Zara barely noticed it happening, she began to trust him. In late November, as the weather turned colder and the threat of winter loomed, Dawson arrived at her corner with a heavy bundle under his arm. "My mother made these for you and your sister," he said, setting down 2 thick wool blankets and a canvas bag. "There is also some dried meat, flour, and sugar in the bag. Winter can be harsh here, and we had extra." Zara looked at the gifts, her throat tight. "I cannot accept this." "Why not?" "Because it is charity." "It is not charity," Dawson said firmly. "It is decency. It is what neighbors do for each other, and whether you like it or not, Zara Kitani, I consider you a neighbor." "We are not neighbors," Zara said. "You do not even know where I live." "Then tell me." "Let me see where you are staying. Let me make sure you and your sister are safe." The request was too much, too intimate. Zara shook her head. "No," Dawson sighed but did not argue. "Will you at least take the blankets? The temperature is going to drop tonight, and I will not sleep easy thinking of you cold." Zara wanted to refuse, but she thought of Nault, of how her sister shivered in the cave at night despite the fire. "The blankets only." "And the food," Dawson pressed. "Please, Zara." "My mother made extra specifically for you. It will go to waste otherwise." It was probably a lie, but it was a kind one, so Zara relented. "Fine, the blankets and the food, but this is the last time. I will not be your charity project." "You are not a project," Dawson said quietly. "You are." He trailed off, seeming to struggle with the right words. "You are someone I have come to care about. Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," Zara wanted to say. "Yes, it is impossible to believe that someone like you could care about someone like me." But the words would not come, so she just gathered up the blankets and the bag and turned to leave. "Zara, wait," Dawson called. She paused but did not turn around. "There is going to be a dance in town next Saturday night, a harvest celebration. I was wondering if you might like to attend. With me." Now Zara did turn around, certain she had misheard. "A dance?" "Yes. There will be music and food and dancing. I thought you might enjoy it." "Your people do not want me at their celebrations," Zara said bitterly. "Some people maybe," Dawson acknowledged, "but not everyone." "And not me. I want you there. I want to dance with you if you will let me." It was madness. It was dangerous. It was everything Zara knew she should refuse. But when she looked at Dawson, at the hope and uncertainty in his eyes, she found herself saying, "I will think about it." That night, wrapped in the new wool blankets that smelled faintly of lavender and cedar, Zara told Nault about the invitation. "You should go," Nault said immediately. "When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because you had to?" It is not that simple. Why not? He likes you, you like him. What is complicated about that? Everything, Zara said. He is white. I am Apache. His people killed our parents, destroyed our home. How can I forget that? Nault was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, our parents would not want you to stop living because they cannot anymore. They would want you to find happiness where you can. Zara knew her sister was right, but knowing and accepting were two different things. She spent the next week in turmoil, working on Sarah's wedding pieces during the day and lying awake at night thinking about Dawson's invitation. On Saturday morning, she made a decision. She would go to the dance, but she would not tell Dawson beforehand. That way, if she lost her courage at the last moment, no one would be disappointed but herself. She and Nault spent hours preparing. Zara had one good dress, a deep red cotton she had been saving, and Nault helped her braid her hair in an intricate pattern, weaving in small white beads. She looked at herself in the small mirror they had traded for months ago and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked almost happy, almost hopeful. The walk to town seemed to take forever and no time at all. The sun was setting as Zara arrived, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She could hear music coming from the community hall, a fiddle and a guitar playing a lively tune. Lanterns hung from posts around the building, casting warm pools of light. Zara stood in the shadows watching people arrive. They were dressed in their finest clothes, laughing and talking. She felt suddenly foolish, a Apache woman in a faded dress thinking she could join a white people's celebration. She was about to turn and leave when she heard her name. Zara. Is that you? She turned to find Sarah hurrying toward her, her face bright with pleasure. You came? Oh, I am so glad. Dawson has been pacing like a caged animal all evening watching the door. Come on, let me take you inside. Before Zara could protest, Sarah had linked arms with her and was guiding her into the hall. The room was decorated with autumn leaves and corn stalks, and tables laden with food lined one wall. People were dancing in the center of the room, spinning and laughing. The warmth and noise were overwhelming after so many months of isolation. Then she saw Dawson. He was standing near the far wall, talking to another ranch hand, but his attention was clearly elsewhere. His eyes kept drifting to the door, and when he finally saw her, his entire face transformed. He excused himself from his conversation and made his way through the crowd, never taking his eyes off her. You came, he said when he reached her, his voice full of wonder. I was not sure you would. I was not sure either, Zara admitted. Dawson smiled, that slow, warm smile she had come to look for in their encounters. He held out his hand. May I have this dance? Zara hesitated. She was aware of people watching them, of the whispers starting at the edges of the room. But she was also aware of Dawson's steady presence, of the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She placed her hand in his. He led her onto the dance floor and pulled her into the pattern of the waltz that was playing. Zara had never danced like this before, but Dawson was patient, guiding her through the steps, his hand warm and sure on her waist. You look beautiful, he said softly, close to her ear. That dress, that color, it suits you. You look different too, Zara said. He was wearing a clean white shirt and a string tie, his hair neatly combed. Cleaner, Dawson laughed, a rich sound that made something warm unfurl in Zara's chest. I clean up occasionally, though I admit it takes considerable effort. As they danced, Zara became aware of the room's reaction to them. Some people were staring with open disapproval, others with curiosity. A few older women were whispering behind their hands, but there were also people who smiled at them, who nodded in greeting. Sarah and her intended were dancing nearby, and Sarah gave Zara an encouraging wink. Ignore them, Dawson said, sensing her discomfort. "Just focus on me." So Zara did. She focused on the feeling of his hand in hers, on the way they moved together across the floor, on the scent of soap and leather that clung to him. She focused on the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room that mattered. They danced 3 dances in a row before Dawson suggested they get some air. Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars brilliant overhead. They walked a little way from the hall, finding a bench near the edge of the town square. "I am glad you came," Dawson said again. "I have been wanting to ask you for weeks now, but I was not sure how you felt." "How I felt about what?" Zara asked, though she suspected she knew. "About me. About this." He gestured between them. "I know I am probably being foolish, that there are 100 reasons why this does not make sense, but I cannot stop thinking about you, Zara. You have gotten under my skin in the best possible way." Zara's heart was racing. She wanted to tell him to stop, that this path led only to pain, but she also wanted him to keep talking, to say all the things she had been afraid to hope for. "I care about you," Dawson continued. "I care about your safety, your happiness. I want to know everything about you, all the stories you have not told me yet. I want to make you smile more because when you smile, it is like the sun coming out from behind clouds." "Dawson," Zara said, his name strange and sweet on her tongue. "I am Apache. You are white. Do you understand what that means? What people will say?" "I understand," Dawson said seriously. "I understand that it will not be easy, but I also understand that some things are worth fighting for, and I think you are one of those things." Zara closed her eyes, torn between fear and longing. "My people have suffered so much at the hands of yours. My parents were killed by soldiers. My village was destroyed. How can I forget that?" "I am not asking you to forget," Dawson said gently. "I would never ask that. What happened to your family, to your people, it was wrong. It was evil. And I am sorry, even though I know my apology cannot undo any of it." "Then what are you asking?" "I am asking if you might be willing to try, to see if maybe there is something here worth exploring." He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I cannot promise it will be easy. I cannot promise that people will accept us. But I can promise that I will stand by you, that I will do everything in my power to protect you and make you happy." Zara looked at their joined hands, at the contrast of his sun-browned skin against hers. It should not work. By all rights, she should walk away, protect her heart, protect her sister. But when she looked up into Dawson's eyes, she saw only sincerity and hope. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know I am too. But I want to try." Dawson's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Yeah." "Yes," Zara said, and felt the truth of it settle in her bones. "Yes, I want to try." He pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like coming home. Zara allowed herself to lean into him, to absorb his warmth and strength. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other under the stars, before finally returning to the dance. This time, when they entered the hall, Zara held her head high, Dawson's hand firmly in hers. "Let people talk." She had survived worse than their disapproval. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness and discovery. Dawson began calling on Zara regularly, riding out to meet her on the road to town so she would not have to walk alone. She eventually told him where she and Nault were staying, and he helped them improve their camp, bringing lumber to build a better shelter and teaching them how to set more effective traps for game. Nault adored Dawson, and he treated her with the same respect and kindness he showed Zara, often bringing her books from his mother's collection or interesting stones he found on the ranch. The 3 of them would sometimes share meals together, And Zara would watch the easy way Dawson and her sister joked with each other and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. Zara's beadwork business flourished. The general store began selling her pieces on consignment as Dawson had suggested, and they sold so quickly that Mr. Peterson was constantly requesting more. Word spread about the quality of her work, and she began receiving commissions from people in neighboring towns. For the first time since her village was destroyed, Zara felt financially secure. More importantly, she felt happy. Dawson made her laugh with his terrible jokes and his exaggerated stories about ranch life. He listened when she talked about her childhood, about the traditions and customs of her people. He asked questions, genuine questions, wanting to understand rather than judge. And slowly, piece by piece, Zara shared her story with him. She told him about the night her village was attacked, about hiding in a root cellar with Nault while soldiers set fire to their homes. She told him about the weeks of traveling afterward, scavenging and hiding, terrified of being caught and sent to a reservation. She told him about the losses she carried, the grief that sometimes threatened to swallow her whole. Dawson listened to all of it, his eyes sad but his presence steady. He did not try to minimize her pain or offer empty platitudes. He just held her hand and promised that no one would ever hurt her like that again, not while he drew breath. In turn, Dawson shared his own sorrows. He told her about his father's death from pneumonia, about the struggle to keep his family together in the aftermath. He told her about the prejudice he had witnessed against Native people, about times he had stood up against it and times, to his shame, when he had stayed silent. He told her about his dreams of owning his own ranch, of building something lasting and good. Winter settled over the territory in earnest, bringing snow and bitter cold. Dawson grew increasingly concerned about Zara and Nault living in their inadequate shelter. One particularly cold December day, he rode out to their canyon with his mother and Sarah in a wagon. "We have been talking," Margaret Fields said without preamble when they arrived, "and we want you and Nault to come stay with us for the winter. We have room, and it is not right for you to be out here in this weather." Zara's first instinct was to refuse, but Nault was shivering despite the fire, and she could see her breath misting in the air even inside their shelter. Still, the thought of accepting such a large kindness, of being that vulnerable, terrified her. "Please," Sarah added, "you would not be charity. You could work on your beadwork, and Mother could use help with the mending. We want you there." Dawson had been hanging back, letting his mother and sister make their case, but now he stepped forward. "I know you value your independence, and I respect that. But sometimes accepting help is not weakness. Sometimes it is just the smart thing to do." Zara looked at Nault, saw the hope in her sister's eyes, and made her decision. "We will come, but only for the winter, and we will earn our keep." "Agreed," Margaret said with a warm smile. The Fields' house was a large adobe structure on the edge of the Triple Creek Ranch property. It was warm and comfortable, with thick walls that kept out the cold and windows that let in the winter sun. Zara and Nault were given a room to share, the first real room either of them had slept in since their village was destroyed. Living with Dawson's family was an adjustment. Margaret was kind but firm, with definite ideas about how things should be done. Sarah was cheerful and talkative, always ready to share gossip or ask questions. The youngest sister, Emma, was 17 and curious about everything, bombarding Zara with questions about Apache culture and traditions. But it was good, being part of a family again. There were meals eaten together around a large table, evenings spent in the parlor with everyone working on their own projects, Margaret knitting while Sarah embroidered, and Emma read aloud from whatever novel she was currently obsessed with. Zara would work on her beadwork while Nault helped with mending, and Dawson, when he was not working, would whittle small figures from pieces of wood. It was during these quiet evenings that Zara fell truly, deeply in love with Dawson. She loved the way he teased his sisters but stood up for them fiercely when anyone outside the family criticized them. She loved how he helped his mother without being asked, how he noticed when she was tired and would take on extra chores. She loved the way he looked at Zara when he thought no one else was watching, his eyes full of tenderness. On Christmas Eve, the Fields family invited Zara and Nalt to join their celebration. It was Zara's first Christmas, and she was overwhelmed by the traditions. The tree decorated with candles and homemade ornaments, the special meal, the exchange of gifts. Dawson gave her a beautiful leather journal, the cover tooled with a geometric pattern similar to her beadwork designs. "For your sketches and ideas," he said. "I know you use rocks and dirt now, but I thought you might like something more permanent." Zara gave him a bolo tie she had made, with a circular pendant of intricate blue and white beadwork. "So you will have a piece of my work always," she said softly. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Zara and Dawson sat together in the parlor, the dying fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. "This is the best Christmas I have had in years," Dawson said. "Having you here, seeing you smile and laugh with my family, it feels right." "It scares me how right it feels," Zara admitted. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong." Dawson took her hand. "I cannot promise that nothing will ever go wrong. Life does not work that way, but I can promise that whatever happens, we will face it together." "Together," Zara repeated, testing the word. It had been just her and Nalt for so long that the idea of including someone else felt foreign, but also wonderful. "Zara, I love you," Dawson said, the words coming out in a rush. "I have been wanting to tell you for weeks now, but I did not know if it was too soon or if you felt the same way, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you. I love your strength and your creativity and the way you protect your sister. I love your laugh and your stubbornness and the way you see the world. I love you, and I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Zara felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were not sad tears. "I love you too," she said. "I did not want to, I fought against it, but I do. I love you, Dawson Fields." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, and Zara felt something inside her that had been frozen for years finally thaw. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Zara asked. "Now," Dawson said, "we figure out our future together." As winter gave way to spring, Dawson and Zara began making plans. He had been saving money for years to buy his own land, and now he had enough for a small parcel near the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, not far from where Sarah and Thomas were planning to build. He showed Zara the land, a beautiful valley with a creek running through it and views of the mountains in every direction. "We could build a house here," he said. "Raise horses, maybe some cattle, make a real home." Zara asked, her heart racing. Dawson got down on one knee, pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. "Zara Kitani, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and partner and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you make me?" Zara looked at him, this man who had bought all her beads and somehow, in the process, won her trust and her heart. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the difficulties they would face. But she also thought about the life they could build together, the love they shared. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." The wedding was planned for early May, right after Sarah's wedding in April. Zara spent hours working on both Sarah's pieces and her own wedding outfit. She created a dress that blended Apache and white traditions, incorporating intricate beadwork into a simple cotton design. It was beautiful and unique, just like the life she was building. Not everyone in town was happy about the engagement. Some people made their disapproval clear, refusing to shop at the general store if they continued to sell Zara's work or crossing the street to avoid speaking to Dawson. But others were supportive, Margaret's church friends rallying around the couple and even throwing Zara a small wedding shower. The night before the wedding, Margaret sat down with Zara in the parlor. "I want you to know," she said, "that I could not be happier that you are marrying my son. You make him better, happier. You are already part of this family, and tomorrow just makes it official." Zara hugged her future mother-in-law, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you for accepting me, for welcoming me and Nalt into your home." "Family takes care of family," Margaret said simply, "and you are family now." The wedding took place in a small church on the edge of Utica, with only close friends and family in attendance. Zara wore her handmade dress and carried wildflowers that Nalt had gathered from the mountains. Dawson wore his best suit with the bolo tie she had made him, looking nervous and happy in equal measure. When they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought, Zara felt the last of her walls crumble. She was taking a leap of faith, trusting in a future she could not predict, but for the first time in years she felt truly hopeful. After the ceremony, there was a small reception at the Fields' house. People danced and ate and celebrated, and Zara was touched by how many people had come to support them. Even some of the townsfolk who had initially been skeptical showed up with gifts and well wishes. As the sun set and guests began to leave, Dawson pulled Zara aside. "Ready to see our house?" "Our house is finished." Zara had known he was working on construction, but she had not realized it was ready. "Finished enough for us to spend our wedding night there at least. The rest we can work on together." They rode out to the valley as the last light faded from the sky, arriving to find a small but solid adobe house with a covered porch and glass windows. Inside, Dawson had set up a bed and table, basic furniture to start their life together. There was even a fireplace already laid with wood, ready to light. "It is not much yet," Dawson said, sounding uncertain, "but it is ours, and we will make it beautiful." "It is already beautiful," Zara said, looking around at their home, their future. "It is perfect." That night, wrapped in each other's arms in their own bed in their own house, Zara felt a peace she had never thought possible. She had lost so much, endured so much pain, but she had survived. And now, impossibly, she had found love and hope and a new beginning. Over the next few years, Zara and Dawson built a life together that exceeded even their most optimistic dreams. They added rooms to the house, built a barn for their growing herd of horses, and planted a garden that produced vegetables and herbs. Nalt lived with them until she was 19, when she married a young Apache man who worked on a neighboring ranch. Their wedding was a beautiful blend of Apache and white traditions, much like Zara's had been. Zara's beadwork business continued to thrive. She began teaching classes to women in town who wanted to learn the craft, and eventually, she wrote down the stories and meanings behind different Apache designs so they would not be lost. Dawson supported her work completely, often taking care of household chores so she would have time to create. In the spring of 1881, Zara gave birth to their first child, a son they named Daniel. He had his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair, and he was the light of their lives. Dawson was a devoted father, spending hours with Daniel even after long days of ranch work, teaching him to ride and rope and respect the land. 2 years later, their daughter Maria was born, followed by another son, Joshua, 3 years after that. The house that had started so small expanded to accommodate their growing family, adding rooms and warmth with each addition. Zara never forgot where she came from or the losses she had endured, but she learned to carry her grief alongside her joy. She taught her children about their Apache heritage, making sure they understood both sides of their identity. She told them stories of their grandmother's wisdom and their grandfather's courage, keeping the memories of her people alive. Dawson stood beside her through all of it, his love never wavering. When people in town made comments about their mixed family, he confronted them calmly but firmly. When Zara had nightmares about the massacre, he held her until the fear passed. When she succeeded, he celebrated with her, and when she struggled, he supported her. Sarah and Thomas became their closest friends and neighbors, their children growing up together. Margaret lived with them in her later years, spoiling her grandchildren and continuing to provide wisdom and support. Emma eventually married a teacher and moved to Santa Fe, but she visited often, bringing books and news from the wider world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dawson took Zara back to the spot in Utica where he had first bought her beadwork. The town had grown and changed, becoming more prosperous and slowly more accepting. "I will never forget the first time I saw you," Dawson said, holding her hand. "Sitting on that corner, so proud and beautiful and alone, I knew even then that you were going to change my life." "You changed mine," Zara replied. "You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You taught me to trust again." "We saved each other," Dawson said, "and I would do it all over again in a heartbeat." They stood there together, watching the sun set over the New Mexico landscape they both loved, their hands intertwined, their hearts full. Zara thought about the young woman she had been, desperate and frightened, trading beads for bread just to survive. That woman could never have imagined this life, this love, this happiness. But Dawson had bought all her beads that day, and somehow in the process he had earned her trust. From that trust had grown love, and from that love had grown a family and a future. It was not the life Zara had been born to, and it was not the life she had expected, but it was hers, and it was beautiful. As they walked back to their horse, Dawson suddenly stopped. "I just realized something." "What?" "That first day, you asked for 20 loaves of bread for all your beadwork, and I gave you $30 instead. I remember. That was the best investment I ever made, $30 for a lifetime of happiness. I would say I got the better end of that bargain." Zara laughed and pulled him close. "We both did." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were droughts that tested their resolve and illnesses that scared them, but through it all, Zara and Dawson's love remained constant. They watched their children grow into capable, compassionate adults who carried forward the best of both their parents' heritages. Daniel became a rancher like his father, taking over much of the day-to-day operations as Dawson grew older. Maria became a teacher, passionate about education and working to establish schools that welcomed children of all backgrounds. Joshua followed in his mother's creative footsteps, becoming a silversmith whose work combined traditional Apache designs with new innovations. Nault and her husband had 4 children, and the two families remained close, celebrating holidays together and supporting each other through hard times. The land that Dawson and Zara had settled became known for its beautiful horses and the quality of its people, a place where different cultures mixed and learned from each other. As they grew older, Zara and Dawson would often sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. They would talk about their children and grandchildren, about improvements to the ranch, about the changes they had seen in the territory over the decades. "You ever regret it?" Dawson asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Marrying me, choosing this life?" Zara looked at him, at the man who had been her partner for more than 40 years, whose hair had gone silver and whose face bore the lines of a life well lived. "Never," she said firmly. You gave me back my life, my hope. How could I regret that? I think you gave me more than I gave you, Dawson said. You taught me about courage and resilience. You showed me what real strength looks like. We gave each other what we needed when we needed it most, Zara said. That is what love is. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined, watching as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Zara thought about that young Apache woman who had sat on a street corner in Utica, trading beads for bread, never imagining that she would find love and family and belonging. She thought about the cowboy who had stopped to look at her work, who had seen her worth when others saw only her differences. Their story was not a fairy tale. They had faced prejudice and hardship, loss and grief. There had been years when money was tight and times when the weight of their responsibilities felt overwhelming. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. When Dawson passed away at the age of 73, peacefully in his sleep after a full day of working on the ranch he loved, Zara grieved deeply. But she also celebrated the life they had built together, the legacy they were leaving behind in their children and grandchildren. She wore his bolo tie every day, the beadwork she had made so many years ago still bright and beautiful. She lived another 5 years, during which she completed a comprehensive record of Apache beadwork traditions and taught dozens of young women the craft her grandmother had taught her. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories of their grandfather's kindness and courage. She made sure they knew how he had bought all her beadwork that day in Utica, how one act of decency had changed everything. When Zara finally passed, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, she was buried next to Dawson on a hill overlooking their valley. The headstone bore both their names and a simple inscription, "Together always." Their story became legend in that part of New Mexico territory, later the state of New Mexico. People told it to illustrate that love could bridge any divide, that kindness could change lives, that trust, once earned, could build foundations that lasted generations. The house they built was maintained by their descendants, who continued to raise horses and honor the land. Zara's beadwork was displayed in museums, her techniques preserved and taught to new generations. The town of Utica grew and prospered, becoming a place known for its acceptance and diversity, a reputation that started, in part, with one cowboy who chose to see an Apache woman's humanity when others would not. And sometimes, when the sun sets over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, people say you can see two figures sitting on the porch of the old Fields ranch house, hands joined, watching the beauty together. Whether it is truth or legend, no one can say for certain. But the love story of Zara Kitani and Dawson Fields lives on, a testament to the power of trust, the possibility of hope, and the enduring nature of true love. Their great-grandchildren still live on the land, still tell the story of how a desperate Apache woman traded beads for bread, and how a compassionate cowboy bought them all and, in doing so, earned her trust. From that trust grew a love that spanned decades, produced a family that honored both their heritages, and created a legacy of compassion and understanding that continued to influence their community long after they were gone. The beadwork Zara created became more than just beautiful objects. They became symbols of resilience, of the blending of cultures, of the art that can emerge from pain transformed by love. Museums across New Mexico displayed her work, and scholars studied her techniques, but for the family, those intricate patterns represented something deeper. They represented the moment when everything changed, when one man chose to see beyond prejudice, and one woman chose to trust again. In the end, Zara and Dawson's story was not just about two people falling in love against the odds. It was about the healing power of genuine compassion, about how single acts of decency can ripple out across generations. It was about choosing hope over despair, about building bridges instead of walls, about seeing the humanity in those society deems different or lesser. The town of Utica, New Mexico, eventually erected a small monument on the corner where Zara used to sell her beadwork. It shows a woman sitting with her, wares spread before her, and a cowboy stopping to look. A moment frozen in bronze that captures the instant when both their lives changed forever. Tourists visit it and hear the story, and some of them walk away changed, thinking about their own opportunities to choose compassion over indifference. But for those who knew Zara and Dawson, who saw them working side by side on their ranch, who witnessed the love in their eyes even after decades of marriage, the real monument was not bronze or stone. It was the family they created, the values they instilled, the example they set. It was the proof that love could transcend the divisions that society tried to enforce, that two people from different worlds could create something beautiful together. Their story proved that trust, once earned through consistent kindness and genuine respect, could form the foundation for something lasting and true. And their happily ever after was not a fairy tale ending where problems disappeared and life became perfect. It was the real, hard-won happiness that comes from choosing each other every day, from building a life together through good times and bad, from never giving up on the promise they made to each other that first night under the stars. As the sun sets over the New Mexico landscape, over the ranch that still bears their name, over the town where they met, and the mountains they loved, the story of Zara and Dawson continues. It continues in the children who carry their blood and their values, in the traditions they preserved, in the art they created, and in the love they proved was possible. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West they lived in, full of courage and challenge, hardship and hope, and ultimately, a love that conquered all.